Hello, my name is Mercy Iroegbu. The paper I'm presenting today is titled Management Policy of Laboratory E-Waste from Grave to Cradle. Electronic waste, otherwise known as e-waste, is growing at an alarming rate around the globe, specifically in developed countries. Electronic waste includes personal computers, phones, or oscilloscopes, signal generators, etc. that has been disposed by the users. Reasons for the disposal may include obsolete technology, end of useful life, faulty components in the device that cannot be fixed. And one of the major sources of this electronic waste is the academic and research institutions. In 2016, 44.7 million metric tons of electronic waste were generated around the globe, and this is estimated to rise to a whopping sum of 55.2 million metric tons in 2021. Electronic waste, if not properly managed, can bring about more harm to the environment and to the people living in the environment. The available e-waste management policy frameworks are based on extended producer responsibility (EPR). This entails that manufacturing companies reclaims their product at the end of its useful life for recycling purposes. As of now, there is no policy framework for e-waste management in educational institutions. The aim of this paper, therefore, is to assist policymakers on the formulation of a policy framework for e-waste management to be adopted where out of use electronic equipment such as computers, oscilloscopes, signal generators, integrated circuits can be channeled to developing countries academic institutions for learning purposes. Now, this will not only reduce the amount of e-waste available for disposal, this will also cater for sustainable education and a global transition towards a secular educational economy. The research presented in this paper is both explanatory and exploratory in nature. It is explanatory as it attempts to identify the gaps in existing e-waste management policies to suggest a better and complementary policy. It is also exploratory as it aims to assess the social acceptance of the suggested policy. Indeed, for a policy to be effective, the needs and concerns of the end users must be assessed and addressed. To ensure this, a qualitative research method was adopted as appropriate for assessing the social acceptance of the proposed laboratory e-waste management policy by developing countries. A survey was designed in the form of multiple choice questions with a mixture of closed and open-ended questions. From the conducted survey, 152 responses were received. However, 7 responses were rendered invalid as the feedback forms had empty fields. Therefore, analysis of the data was done based on 145 responses. The questionnaire started by examining the age and education level of participants to ascertain whether the respondents are major stakeholders in the education sector. The results collected indicate that approximately 95.1% of the respondents are major stakeholders in the education sector, thus giving credence to the information received from this survey. In the assessment of the respondents' awareness of e-waste and the impact of effectively managing e-waste, approximately 99.3% seem to acknowledge the role of e-waste management for the development of sustainable engineering learning environments. Despite the reported lack of e-waste management policies in most educational institutions, 93.7% of the respondents are aware of the concept of e-waste management. While nearly two-quarters of respondents faulted the policy management of e-waste disposal in their institution, a third claimed that e-waste management was adequate. In that regard, around 21% of the participants were undecided, meaning that adequate sensitization should be made at such institutions on how e-waste is managed. From the survey, 42.7% of the respondents thought that their institutions are adequately equipped. Approximately 37.2% ascertained that their laboratories are under-equipped, while 20% are not certain whether there is adequate equipment or not. The results also reveal that most of the laboratories are not adequately equipped due to financial constraints, as a greater percentage of the respondents expressed difficulties in acquiring the equipment. The results reveal that most of the respondents are willing to accept the policy provided the equipment are reusable and informative learning activities can be included. From the data obtained from the survey, the deployment of out-of-use laboratory equipment would be beneficial to academic institutions in developing countries in Africa, and if done in good faith, would lead to achieving the grave-to-cradle concept for the secular education economy. However, for the policy to be effective, the concerns raised by the survey participants must be considered in the formulation of the policy framework. To address the concerns of e-waste dumping, this paper proposes that the policy must require the following conditions to be fulfilled before the deployment of the equipment. First is that the electronic equipment must be in repairable condition. Confirmatory testing of equipment must be done to check its functionality and safety. Secondly, electronic equipment should have at least 5 years of useful life. The equipment must be evaluated using a set of global standards. Thirdly, the certified equipment must be branded to enable tracking to its intended destination. And lastly, learning activities must be included. Complementary training of staff in developing countries must be facilitated for them to acquire technical prowess. The following are recommendations to the stakeholders in e-waste management policy making. For the success of the proposed grave-to-cradle e-waste management, the following have to be implemented. First, enact an e-waste management policy framework that focuses on the deployment of outdated laboratory equipment to developing countries for learning purposes and implement a global standard system that satisfies the equipment for export. Develop and introduce sustainable e-waste management curricula in educational institutions to promote sustainable education, and engage manufacturers to develop technology training and capacity building programs in developing countries to avoid the abandonment of the deployed equipment. Legislators must put in place more stringent policies and laws to encourage corruption. Further research. For the policy to be holistic, further research is to be carried out to assess the willingness of universities in the developed countries to participate in the proposed laboratory e-waste management system. Also, there is a need to conduct empirical inquiries on the amount of out-of-use equipment piled in the universities. Further study and research on the required law and policy reformations to support the proposed laboratory e-waste management policy must be conducted. As well as studying the adverse effects of e-waste, the study has critically reviewed existing e-waste management policies. It has highlighted that existing policies have not been entirely effective due to existing loopholes. Also, the study identified a research gap on the contribution of e-waste management to sustainable education, whereby a lack of academic equipment in educational institutions of developing countries can be improved by reusing out-of-use equipment from universities in the developed countries. Although this suggested policy might not be the panacea to solving the problems of e-waste, it could complement the existing policies to mitigate the environmental footprint of e-waste while also contributing towards the achievement of a sustainable